Hi, I am Silveria Jacobs, and today I'd like to welcome you to our very first National Alliance Information Program for 2014. This first program will highlight the press conference recently held by our members of Parliament. In the format, you will also get to hear on ways that you can contact us and how you will be able to have your input on this program and on the National Alliance. The first segment that you'll be witnessing will be our Member of Parliament, Mr. William Marlin, as he gives his views on upcoming elections for 2014.
One of the first issues that we would like to touch on is the upcoming election date. Generally, it was so that the people of St. Martin knew when particularly the island elections would be held because the government always had to sit no matter what until the government changes on the 2nd of July. You can change as many coalitions as you would want, but government in the old system, the government of St. Martin could not be dissolved. The Island Council could not be dissolved. Parliament, however, can be dissolved, so therefore you could have elections prior to what would be, in our case now, the deadline for Parliament to be in office, which would be October 10, 2014, because the Parliament took office on October 10, 2010. Last year, when we had the developments during the change of the second Westcott Williams cabinet, when we had the situation where there was a number, 4 members who had written a letter saying they withdraw their support from the government, and 5 ministers during a Council of Ministers meeting took a decision to dissolve Parliament. Not that we are going back to that situation, but if the decision was carried out at that time by the Prime Minister, it would have meant that Parliament would have been dissolved and we would have had elections within 3 months. That is now a station passé, and we are a year further. What is remarkable, however, is that even almost a year after that, the Prime Minister, who is responsible for the elections in terms of ensuring that the Electoral Council is established, is manned, is equipped and ready, and who is responsible for the other legislations and other issues pertaining to election, is today saying we cannot have early elections because we need to put things in place. So it almost gives you the impression that the Prime Minister, even then, a year ago, put up a hectic fight because we would have been in trouble because the legislation or the execution of legislation, such as putting the Electoral Council, etc., in place, was not done. So that's one side of the coin. Then on the other side of the coin, you have the biggest coalition party, coalition partner, the UP party. Its leader is saying they favor elections earlier than September, and definitely not during the hurricane season. Now, the hurricane season runs from June until October or the 1st of November. So the question would be, then if not in the hurricane season, then when? Because the public of St. Martin, legislation prescribes that we would need 3 months notification for all the things to be in place in terms of political parties, registering political parties, postulating their candidates, the signing of the lists and all of those things, and then the campaign period. And you can't have, at least in our system, we don't have an election on Friday and the government changes on Saturday like you have in Anguilla. You would have an election on Monday, and on Tuesday, the new government takes over the administration. So given all that, there is still no guarantee as to when the elections will be held. And this is not fair to, one, potential political parties who are looking to compete, but more so to the public of St. Martin, who, particularly in the summer months, people go on vacation with their families, people leave the island, school teachers, civil servants take vacation, and they go on a vacation. People need to plan their vacation, and people do not want to be off island when the election will be held. So if one knows today that the elections are in June or July, then they can plan towards it. If they know it is August or September, then they can plan also. So it is not right what the coalition partners are doing to the public of St. Martin by, at one end, the biggest coalition partner saying, we don't favor elections in the hurricane season, and on the other end, the Prime Minister, on behalf of the Council of Ministers or not, is not clear to us, is saying the tentative date would be September 5th. Now, it can go from September 5th to September 12th, but it can also go to September 19th, so to speak, because in 2010, elections were held on the 17th of September, and the government sat on the 10th of October. So important here is that there is clarity on the part of government as to exactly when the election day would be. As for the National Alliance, we have been basically a year ago saying let's dissolve Parliament and give the people the opportunity to express themselves in an election, give a fresh mandate to the body politics as to who they would want to see in government, and we still stand by it. So needless to say that we have been ready, because for us, more than the political parties, the people are ready. So political parties can say that they are ready, but the public of St. Martin has been ready for more than a year now, hoping to find out and to hear when they will be given an opportunity to go to the polls so that they can express their sentiments through the ballot.
Finally, we are coming close to the finalization of the short-term contract. In other words, we are not talking about eliminating that contract, but the issue of the abuse of the labor contract. As you know, what has been happening in the past, as present, that is being used to, of course, prevent employees from becoming permanent. And the whole issue is this, that during many campaigns, the political parties have stated that they were going to work on this process. However, it took some time, but eventually the National Alliance, under the leadership of our leader, Mr. William Marlin, decided to come with an initiative draft legislation in order to bring a change in the Civil Code, Book 7A, in order to ensure that as much as possible to eliminate the abuse of that contract and not the use of it, because very often people look at it and say, well, we want to stop the 6 months contract. It is not a 6 months contract. It is called a short-term contract because it can be for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, or whatever. So that's what we're working on right now. As a matter of fact, 2 days ago, I gave the final documentation to the Chair Leader of Parliament via the Griffith, of course. And we also ensure that within that documentation, what is mentioned is that we need to get a response as soon as possible, at least we didn't mention in the documentation, but at least we're looking at least 2 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks in order to finalize this matter once and for all. We have contacted different organizations, of course, based on the law, the Social Economic Council, the Advisory Council, and because of certain changes that they requested, it took us some time in order to proceed with documentation. They have responded to us back and forth, and we have also done the same with them and so on. But finally, we have decided now enough is enough. It started in mid-2011. We are now approaching mid-2014. Almost 3 years has gone by, and this process is still ongoing. So we've decided now, this is the final process. We have sent the necessary documentation to these advisory councils, and it's time now for them to respond. If they don't respond within a period of time, we will proceed to have it brought to the Central Committee and then in a plenary session. What has happened? Very often, I'm sure my colleagues have been approached by different persons who have worked, and in this case, I got to mention businesses that are of a permanent nature, casinos, restaurants, hotels, and so on. And what I've done is use this short-term contract in order to give you one contract, two contracts, the third one, the same one for 3-4 months, and then bring you back to do the same job. So we're saying, no, it is not right. If you have the individual working in your company, one contract, two contracts, the third contract, then they should become permanent because it is affecting what is taking place in society. One of the arguments that was brought up by the Social Economic Council and the Advisory Council was that, yes, they don't have any figures as to what is actually happening, whether it's hampering the economy, yes or no. And we said that based on complaints of many, many persons, we don't have to do a survey. You can see exactly what is taking place, and we are saying right now we have to ensure that a change takes place where that's concerned. What this thing has done, and my leader has done it over and over repeatedly, explaining what was taking place, is that because of this short-term contract, or let me say, like we will call it a six-month contract, that persons who are employed, they want to get a loan, they can't get a loan from the bank, they can't get nothing at all done because the fact is they're not sure that they have consistency with regards to employment. Now, I received information recently, just about 2 days ago, where this government, right now at the labor office, if somebody goes, in this case, non-national because, of course, they need to apply for the renewal of the employment permit, they're being rejected because the 6 months that is given for the contract is not accepted, and therefore they are not receiving the employment permit. So I'm saying, again, this is showing, again, the importance of us ensuring that this employment contract or employment ordinance is adjusted in order to ensure that these people are treated properly and make sure that they get the necessary employment that they deserve. Another matter which I want to touch on briefly is the issue of the meeting we had on the budget, where some questions were asked to the Minister of Economic Affairs, Mr. Ted Richardson, and it had to do with several documentation that are supposed to be in the pipeline according to what I heard. One of them has been around for some 20 years, which I learned, listened to a radio program where the charter director, Mr. Emil Lee, said that Mr. Kit Franca was asking for the last minutes in order to get this thing done. Now he said he spoke to Mr. Richardson, who said that the draft is ready. So I'll be sending a letter through the chair lady to the minister requesting a copy of that draft, and also how far has he got in regards to the Consumer Protection Agency, which he discussed, and also the basic goods that was supposed to be added to those that are already in existence. So the issue is that we are looking at St. Martin where cost of living is increasing, and as much as possible, we must ensure to limit the expenses on the persons who are confronted with these things. We know the containers right now, because of the container fees, have been increased to do what our famous causeway or a bridge. We find ourselves where cost is going up, but at the same time, the income is remaining the same. So these are issues I'm going to deal with in the future, and I'll keep the press abreast as to what is taking place.
I almost thought it was a rehearsal for an April Fool's Day joke when I read in the paper that the UP leader is expressing concerns with respect to the issue and the merger, or the pending merger at Tilem UTS. I thought it was a rehearsal for an April Fool's Day joke, because if the UP leader was seriously concerned, what he would have done or suggested is precisely what the National Alliance will do, and that is to call the minister, the government, to come to Parliament and explain to the people of St. Martin, but more importantly, the workers of Tilem, what their status is with regards to the merger of, or any pending merger of Tilem UTS. At least a little bit of respect for those people is what they deserve, instead of playing the smoke and mirror politics that the UP leader is attempting to do. And so if there was any seriousness with respect to the matter that was raised by him with regards to the pending merger or the prospective merger of any Tilem UTS, he would have done precisely what I mentioned there. It is misleading because his track record with respect to the social security of the people of St. Martin leaves a lot to be desired. You can look at the way all people of St. Martin, you can look at how UP has thrown this country into a state of limbo. jobs that we thought were stable, jobs, government institutions that we thought were once stable security for the workers of St. Martin, today, all of them are in a state of limbo. Take the airport into consideration. Those folks don't know what their future holds with respect to government and the ongoings taken on at the Princess Juliana International Airport. If the UP leader had any regard for job security and the concerns of the people of St. Martin, he would have signed in, he would have allowed his members to sign in and give a quorum to at least bring clarity to the situation at the Princess Juliana International Airport, instead of denying the people of St. Martin, but more importantly, the workers of the Princess Juliana International Airport, to at least know what their future holds and what can be expected with respect to the future development at the Princess Juliana International Airport. Same holds for the job security situation of persons that are affected in what we thought was stable, job secured institutions such as banks. This government is supportive, at least is not representing the people when they are in need of representation. And that is why you see today investors can do and are doing as they like, as they see fit, with the workers and the people of St. Martin, totally disregarding, in some instances, the labor laws and the laws in general with respect to governance and proper governance of St. Martin. And these are just some of the things and areas that are evident that the UP leader is doing nothing more than playing political games and using the people as pawns because he is prepared to win an election. And while the social issues confronting the people of St. Martin and the people in general, this country is in a state of limbo, all he is concerned about is winning an election, and that is sad, very, very sad. The last item that I want to cover has to do with the issue that we discussed or debated just some day here ago in Parliament with regards to lump sum payouts. I have been in discussions with persons at the tax department to present the legislation to me and look at it to see how and if the legislation can be amended in such a way that in the event that someone loses his or her job because of no fault of their own, that a lump sum payout would not be, that person would not be subjected to the draconian tax percentage that is governed today. And so the thinking is that in cases like those, persons would pay their taxes, but they would pay a much more palatable tax rate. And we are looking at, I'm thinking, and I'm just thinking aloud, somewhere in the range of 10, in between 20%, that could be more palatable. But I would be happy with 10%, but of course, that legislation is a long way off, and discussions yet has to take place between us as members of the National Alliance. Naturally, the committee, the Finance Committee, I have asked my colleague, George Pontefilet, to convene a meeting to officially begin the process of seeing how we can move forward with that possibility. I have also indicated, I have also asked the minister for his assistance, and he has pledged that he will use all technical aspects and the infrastructure at his service to help guide the process, and hopefully this matter can be and can come to Parliament for treatment rather swiftly. So those are the two items that I would want to touch at this moment, and leave it there for now.
What employers are doing right now, they're making contracts for the employees, and they what you're doing, intimidate them to the extent where they're saying you're not allowed to go with your contract, you have to read it there and sign it there and then. And if you don't do so, then of course you're not employed. So there are labor laws, and I believe that it's important for people to know that they have their rights to take that contract, read it, even get legal advice prior to doing so. So I just want to say to the employees, stop the intimidation. The fact of the matter is that everybody has rights. We must ensure that these rights are followed.
Well, the question about the election date, I thought that the election date is September 5. That's quite clear, based on if we talk about the regular elections, counting back from 10-10-10, all those stipulations in the law that land you there 5. Maybe there's like a margin of 10 days or something that you could move it up or down.
Yeah.
What I get from you is that you favor actually what the UP favors as well.
No.
Earlier elections.
What the National Alliance is saying is government
Mhm.
has to come clean with the people and stipulate a date.
Mhm.
Right now, the impression that you get is that the Prime Minister is saying, because of the things that still need to be done, an earlier date is not possible. And the UP leader is saying, who is a major coalition partner, we are not in agreement with earlier with elections in September. We would favor earlier elections.
Yeah,
we-
because September is the peak month of the hurricane season.
September is the peak month. Hurricanes have been known to come to St. Martin even in November and once in December.
No, that is-
But of course, the peak is September, but you can also get a hurricane in August, you can get one
Yeah.
in June and in July.
Yeah.
The point is, first you try and you create a situation that if something happens in the central bank, we are going to pull our support from the government. Then you hear all kind of other rumblings, and so there are reasons being looked at to destabilize the country again. People need to know where they stand. As I said, the election is not just about political parties. The elections is for the voters to be given an opportunity to elect their representatives. And voters need to know where they stand. Is it going to be in September? Then people can plan their vacation, can plan their life. If it is in July, then they know where they stand. But don't be tugging and pulling, playing with an important issue. There's a difference when the politicians are jabbing at each other, but in this case, it's the people who don't know where they stand with government if government cannot firmly, as government state, of this is the date. Now, of course, anything can happen. If the UP wants to pull its support, they can do it today, tomorrow, next week, or next month. That is their good right. And if the DP want to pull their support, or independent members who are supporting the government want to pull their support, that is their good right. So you have several options. That is what took place last year. You had 4 members of parliament wrote a letter and said, we are withdrawing our support from the government. The government immediately retaliated and said, we are dissolving parliament. We had that whole discussion,
Yeah, well,
which I don't
yeah.
want to bring up again,
No, well, we were-
but it is that
Yeah.
balance and counterbalance that you have where government have a right to dissolve parliament, but parliament can also express a motion of no confidence in 1, 2, or more, or the entire government. In that case, they said, we no longer support the government. So the government lost a majority, but government also, 5 ministers said, we want to make use of Article 95, I think it is, and we will dissolve parliament. Now, that battle, we know how that ended.
But
In this case, the same thing can happen.
yeah.
Next week, we can have a meeting of parliament, or tomorrow or tonight, if the UP faction write a letter and say we no longer support the government, we have no majority in government, and it may likely result, let's say, in early elections. Because to go again, to patch up a new government, to put a new government in place for a couple of months would make very little sense.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that can result in early elections.
But you could also say that then the government stays as a caretaker government until the elections on the 5th of September.
That is not something I think that would be good for St. Martin. I don't think, I'm not trying to put words in the governor's mouth or speak on behalf of the governor, but I don't think it would be wise for you to have a caretaker government in office for 6 or 7 months. That's not a good thing for the people. We have said already from last year that we were ready because we think the people, the focus has to be on the people and not the political parties. The people of St. Martin are sick and tired of the governance they have received, the representation they are getting, and are sick and tired of people crossing aisles from one political party to another. That phenomenon, the people are saying, we want to be given the opportunity to go to the polls and give a fresh mandate to the people who we would want to see in Parliament and by extension, government. So the National Alliance has been ready and we are ready. What we are saying is the political parties and factions making up the government need to act responsibly and basically tell the people of St. Martin where they stand. Are we going to have elections in September, or are we going to have early elections? Yes, if something happens, if something fundamental happens, that one says, well, no, we cannot continue governing in this way, then you're talking about a crisis in government. But for one to simply orchestrate the fall of a government because it is politically feasible for that individual or that party is not a good thing for the people of St. Martin. The focus has to be on the people and not on political parties.
Thank you so much for your attention. We've come to the end of this first program, but if you have any questions, please send them to feelfreetoaskna@gmail.com. I repeat, feelfreetoaskna@gmail.com. In our subsequent programs, we will be doing our best to answer your questions as they come in. We believe that informing the public is the best way to go for 2014 and beyond. Thank you so much as we stay on the white line.
Let we follow the white line down the road to the polls, girl.